In 1861, a literal divide cut through the United States. Throughout the 1850s, the debate over the expansion of slavery fractured the country along these geographic and political lines. This wasn't a temporary disagreement. The nation was sliding toward a civil war that threatened the survival of the American Republic. As the crisis deepened, the federal government sat in a vacuum of leadership. The country required a seasoned executive to steer the government through this instability. Saving the Union meant finding a leader who could command and unify a population that no longer spoke the same political language. Three political titans, William Seward, Salmon Chase, and Edward Bates, believed they were the only ones capable of the task. They were established, gifted, and ready to take the presidency. At the 1860 Republican National Convention in Chicago, the expectation was that one of these prominent men would walk away with the nomination. Instead, the party chose Abraham Lincoln, a one-term congressman from Illinois who had risen from total obscurity. His rivals were stunned. They viewed Lincoln as an inexperienced underdog, entirely unprepared for the weight of the presidency. To many observers, the crisis had just worsened. Lincoln was now heading a collapsing country, while surrounded by the very men he had just defeated. Typically, a new president consolidates power by casting out rivals. Removing internal dissent is standard. Lincoln did the opposite. He invited his rivals to join his cabinet, placing his most vocal critics in the highest positions of power. This created a volatile environment. It forced men with massive egos and deep resentments to operate within the same small circle of advisors. Lincoln bet that the interpersonal friction within his cabinet would generate the strategic energy needed to resolve the conflict across the nation. To manage this group, Lincoln relied on a specific psychological tool: radical empathy. Lincoln used radical empathy as a tactical advantage. He focused on putting himself perfectly in the place of other men to predict their reactions. He spent his time mapping the inner worlds of his rivals, identifying the motives and fears that drove their political decisions. This understanding allowed him to endure their public and private disrespect. By knowing their motives, he could prevent his own ego from escalating the conflict. He acted as a mediator between his advisors. When their ambitions clashed, Lincoln absorbed the emotional pressure to keep the cabinet from fracturing. Radical empathy was his operational engine. It allowed him to transform personal ambition into a functional, unified strategy. From 1861 through 1863, the Civil War tested the limits of this administration. Constant military defeats and a massive human toll strained the unity of the cabinet to its breaking point. Lincoln coordinated the departments run by his rivals, ensuring that the Treasury, the State Department, and the War Department worked in lockstep. By preventing bureaucratic infighting, he kept the army supplied and funded even during the Union's darkest retreats. He secured their loyalty by giving them the credit for every victory, while taking the personal blame for their administrative failures. This management of the cabinet's internal machinery is what provided the logistical and political stability the Union Army needed to remain resilient under fire. By 1865, the dynamic inside the White House had shifted. The cabinet had moved from a state of bitter rivalry to a unified front. The men who once looked down on Lincoln were now his most loyal supporters and the chief architects of the Union's victory. Traditional history often presents Lincoln as a solitary moral figure. However, his power came from a high level of emotional intelligence. His ability to understand and manipulate the motivations of others was his most effective tool of statecraft. Lincoln proved that true leadership is the capacity to turn a group of bitter opponents